Welcome to Baseera Inner Reflections. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Sayyid al-Anbiya'i wal-Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyatihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear listeners, inshallah, welcome to another episode of Baseera Inner Reflections. And we're here, your host, inshallah, Zainab, and Sister Aya, inshallah. So, Bismillah, Sister Aya.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sister Zainab. An honor to be another episode, beautiful episode of the Al Basira, and we're welcoming back dear Professor Selahattin Aydin from Turkiÿe. MashaAllah, we enjoyed our first two episodes with the professor, and we're continuing on our journey of knowledge seeking and reflections with Professor Aydin. So today we're going to dive into the concept of disability in Islam. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful program. And I would like to say Assalamu alaikum to everyone who is hearing us.
Barakallah feek for joining us, Professor. So I think, inshallah, we'd like to begin, inshallah, because I know, mashallah, you've done a lot of research into looking within disabilities and the Western understanding and from the Islamic perspective. So just looking from the Islamic perspective, how would you say that from the Islamic perspective, disability or the understanding of having a disability differs?
Okay, when you ask this question, actually you are implying comparison. So in order to answer your question, I'll need to make a simple comparison with the Islamic perspective and the perspective imposed us by the today's world. Islam is a system, just like many systems, but Islam differs from other systems in a unique way. Mainly, all systems offer a solution for social problems. I mean, all systems promises happiness. All systems like communism, like capitalism, or whatever ism you can remember, all isms argues that they will provide happiness and welfare or so. But Islam is the only one system who has kept its promise. When we remember the prophetic era, we can see many evidence of these arguments. I argue that Islam is the only one system who has kept his promise to humanity. The other systems have failed. There is no need to provide evidence for this. When you observe the world we are living in now, we can easily understand that the other systems have failed to keep their promises. We are going to go into detail about this, but before, I do want to touch upon the meaning of disability in today's world. When we talk about disability, we are talking about a concept or phenomena, but mainly we are talking about a social group labeled as disabled. When we talk about a disabled person, we are talking about a label. Disabilities are de-individualized group of people. For example, when they see me with my white cane, I'm not Selahattin. I am a blind person, losing my identity. Whatever who I am, whatever my qualifications are, they are just talking about a label. Sometimes I say, when you look at me, you are unable to see a person. You are just seeing a white cane. So I am reduced to be a white cane. So when we talk about disability, we are talking about a category of people who are labeled as disabled, meaning who cannot do anything, who are needy, and moreover useless, burden on the society. And this is the meaning of disability in today's world. So this is the label And when we talk about disability or disabled, we are talking about a categorized group. So disability is a kind of social categorization in today's world. And activists and those who have moved this concept into political arena are fighting against this understanding. When we come to Islamic perspective, we cannot see such a concept called disabled. I'm not the first academician coming up with this argument. Inshallah, I will not be the final one. I do want to mention two remarkable scholars who have provided valuable monographs in this field. One is Mohammed Ghali from Leiden University of Netherlands. He has composed a fantastic PhD thesis, and he has published his thesis. I cannot remember the name of the book exactly. I don't want to make a verbal mistake, but Disability in Islam, I think his book is called. He has discussed this from the Islamic perspective in a deep understanding. He has talked about in terms of mazhabs, in terms of Islamic philosophy, and
Yes.
he has come up with an argument and said that there is no such a concept in Islamic perspective. I'm going to answer why there is no such a concept in Islamic perspective.
Okay.
The other scholar is Sarah Scaling. She has also wrote a fantastic monograph. I think the title was Disability in 16 and 15 and 16th centuries in Islam, in Arabic Ottoman world or so. If you make a simple Google search, I'm pretty sure you are going to find out her work also. And there are other resources as well discussing the deaf community in Ottoman era. I am referring to Ottoman era. The reason is that Ottoman society, the society in such centuries, are formed heavily by the Islamic beliefs. So anyone who wants to know what it means to be disabled in Islamic society should refer to such resources. And such findings indicate that there is no disability. When I come up with this argument, some people say, when you say there is no disability in Islam, how do you mean? There is blindness, there is deafness, yes. From the beginning of humanity, we could see deafness, we could see blindness, but being deaf and being blind did not serve as a derogatory label. For example, in my society, there are many families having surname like blind. For example, you say, my name is Zeynep Riyaz. Riyaz is your family name, right? But in Turkish society, there are many families having last name as blind. For example, son of blind. In today's world, if you ask someone, do you want to have such a last name? They would say, are you crazy? Why should I own such a last name? And Mr. Blind, can you say anyway, hey, Mr. Blind, how are you today? When you say, it will be kind of, undesirable way of talking. The reason is that in the society where beliefs are so strong, blindness is not such a bad thing. So when we look at the history, we can see many scholars who were blind, who were deaf, but they were appointed as the judge, for example. I would like to mention two books written in, I think it was in 14th century by Es-Safadi. Es-Safadi has made two biography dictionaries. One of them contains blind scholars, philosophers, and statesmen who have contributed their society. And the other biography dictionary composed by As-Safadi contains life stories of partially cited statesmen and philosophers and judges, for example, significant or remarkable individuals lived in the era. These indicate that being blind is a kind of a natural, understandable human character. Being deaf, for example, is a natural human character. In order to prove my argument, I would like to mention about another portrait. The name of the gentleman is Ibrahim Bizaban, who lived in 16th century in Istanbul, and who has served as calligrapher, I think I should say calligrapher. He was totally deaf, but who has written Al-Quran al-Karim by hand, and his work is exhibited in Topkapı Palace today. What I am trying to say, that society has produced a very famous calligrapher from a deaf person. But today, we are going to teach them, if we can teach them 1,000, 2,000 words, we consider ourselves successful. But at that time, the society has produced a famous calligrapher with complete or total deafness. I can talk about many examples, but such examples in that we cannot see any concept called disability in Islam, and yet people having lameness, blindness, deafness are not categorized or not excluded from the society. Even being blind was a kind of advantage in memorizing Quran. In Ottoman period, there were many famous religious servicers with blindness, and they are supposed to be advantages over non-disabled individuals, because Quran is written, but even if you write with the letters, Arabic letters, in order to recite Quran successfully, you will need to have hearing capability. They say blind people are advantageous because they rely on their ears and they rely on their hearing capabilities. So they are the one who can pronounce letters or tajweed rules successfully. And they were chosen to be imam of palaces. Say that you are a rich person and you want to have qari or reciter in your house. They would prefer blind people for some reasons. The first reason was that the blind reciters were more successful when compared to non-disabled counterparts. The second one was that the blind person cannot see around, so he cannot violate our privacy. So being blind was advantage. And just consider what it means to be a religious servicer in that area. You are the top. You have no problem with marriage. You have no problem with financial issues. So there are many things we can talk about. For example, deaf people were employed in courts of Ottoman because they said in courts, silence is needed, and they have used sign language. And most of the Ottoman sultans knew sign languages. And in 16th century, we could see a sign language school in Ottoman palace. And Ottoman sultans have appointed some consultants from deaf people. Their task were to observe the society and bring information about the social life to Sultan. So deaf people were fans of Ottoman sultans. I can increase the examples, but I
Yes.
think such examples would be a kind of inspiration to answer your question.
Definitely. I mean, it's been remarkable to hear how things have probably changed in today's society compared to traditional Ottoman society or for other Islamic civilizations. One further question that I was just, reflecting on was, uh, how did the society support these individuals in seeking education or seeking or in learning? Do we have evidence of this? Like you've mentioned, how high they were, some people who had disabilities within society, their ranks were quite high as they were, in part of the court of the Ottoman sultans. But I think a question that I was just reflecting on is, in terms of educating as a child, how would it be? Would they have specialist schools, or would they? What support network would they need? I mean, today's society, we see technology as being a beautiful asset in a sense, supporting people to seek education and gain more independence. How did that society support people with different needs?
A good question. When we look at the resources, we can see some schools dedicated for blind individuals, but as far as I know, because the archives are huge enough, I mean, there are many things to be investigated, but as far as I know, most of them were trained in mainstream schools without having special education. But as I told you, we know that there was a sign language training center in Topkapı Palace. Sign language was composed at that time. But in order to understand the value of this, we should know that Turkish and Arabic and Persian are such languages built upon deep meanings. For example, if you try to translate Arabic text into English by using robots, you cannot do that, because Arabic has a nature which cannot be dealt with robots. Under such conditions, producing a sign language is not easy. For example, you can teach some concrete things. You can teach a deaf person what it means, what does glass mean. But how can you teach them love? Love is not a concrete thing, for example. How can you teach them angels? You cannot see them, but they have done it somehow. When I checked the resources while composing an article, I have found that there are some waqfs, waqf meaning foundations. Their constitution said, for example, 20% of the income of this waqf to be spent for persons with blindness. I have seen such remarks on the constitutions of waqfs built in such era. So I can say two things. One is there were some dedicated organizations or institutions, it's better to say institutions, and some of them were trained in mainstream places. But when I return back to Safadi's work, Safadi wrote 2 biography dictionaries, and he's talking about several hundred famous individuals with blindness or partial sight.
And Safadi's probably talking from his time. So would
Yes.
those biographies that were compiled were not from history, but they were from his current time? Is that
yes?
Is that
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So most of them relied on listening. Some were reading for them, and when they composed their books or monographs, they were saying, and the others were writing on behalf of them. And I can talk about many remarkable individuals, mainly with blindness. For example, Mustafa Darir is not only a scholar, he is a very famous philosopher, and his story is so interesting. So he has worked a lot, and he has composed a significant number of monographs. When I consider the conditions, when I try to compare, I cannot compare completely because I don't have any idea about their conditions. But as a blind person, I say, without my computer, what can I do? I can be a total blind person because I read through my computer, I write by my computer. Without computer, I cannot do. But Mustafa Darir had no computer, but he had succeeded composing a significant number of monographs. This is really amazing. Needs to be discovered in detail.
And the work of As-Safadi that you mentioned, is that in Turkish, the volume? So if any brothers and sisters in our who are fluent in Turkey, inshallah.
It is in Arabic. I have captured the books. I am trying to make a project to be submitted to Cultural Ministry of Turkiÿe, and I will ask them to translate it into Turkish and English as well. The books are historical books. I have found one of them in United Arab Emirates. Probably I have found it in Dubai, and I have found one in Amman of Jordan. I have got the books sitting on my desk. I am preparing a project to be submitted to Cultural Ministry of Turkey. Such things, such realities should be known by humanity. This would be a great service because millions of people are suffering because of societal attitudes, because they are blind, because they are crippled, because they are whatever, they are deaf. But we need to think of the benefit of blindness. I can talk about benefit of blindness if you want, but I don't want anyone to be blind.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on, I know we've spoke about blindness and we spoke about deafness, but other disabilities sometimes, like how are people it's perceived with having, maybe more physical disability, well, blindness and deafness just coming to, but maybe with, say, for example, maybe any type of paralysis. So with societies like this supportive fully for people maybe who had difficulty walking or engaging, in other ways, or other weaknesses? How were people with special needs or disabilities at that time treated in society, and was it as fair for them as it was for people with having blindness and deafness as well, as you've mentioned?
All right. It is not easy to feel the atmosphere of that time for us, because when we talk about disability, we are concerned with accessibility. For example, when we go out, we are looking for accessible pavements, right? We are looking for accessible cross sections. We are looking for accessible trains, or so on and so. At that time, there was no traffic. There was no such kind of urbanization. As a person who has spent his childhood in the rural area, I did not have any difficulty because urbanization style was different. We are not threatened by cars, buses, vehicles. So life would be different. But I can say that, for example, just consider mentally retarded individuals. In other societies, they were institutionalized, and in order to produce sterilized society. But mentally retarded individuals were living with their families. There are some evidence saying that mentally retarded individuals were with their families, and they were even, there are some rules and regulations trying to regulate how people should behave them. But such regulations were based on the religion, of course. Society was encouraged not to treat them badly. This is what I can say. But we know that there were no special places to put them in a prison, but there were some places called shifahane, like hospitals, like treatment centers, I can say. They have used musics. They have used music to make them calm, make them treated. But at the end of the day, they were not excluded from the society. They were living with their own families.
Yes, and I know you spoke about the shifa khanas. I know I came off one of the shifa khanas, I think it's Edirne in North Turkey. Is it North Turkey, if I'm correct?
West. It's
Turkey,
yeah, bordered with Bulgaria and Greece.
Barakallah feek, Professor, inshallah, for your insight and such deep reflections, inshallah.
I'm actually enjoying the conversations and the deep knowledge coverage on the historical part that I didn't know anything about, and I'm sure the listeners are going to be enjoying that part. And I totally agree that inshallah, your project, Professor, would go through in Turkish and in English, in Arabic, in so many languages, because we need to uncover more of our history, more of our Islamic knowledge, inshallah, and disseminate that. I would like to close the episode actually on your personal reflection, your personal experience on dealing with society or trying to change this perspective in society. For example, being a professor, in your other occupations. Can you share with us?
Definitely, it's a very hard question. First of all, I would like to re-mention two important books. One is Muhammad Ghali's book, Disability in Islam, and the other one is Sarah Sculling's book, Disability in Ottoman and Arabic worlds in 15th and 16th century. These two books provide valuable insight. Anyone who is interested in learning about this topic should see those two books. And I would like to thank both of the academicians for their work. Regarding your question, well, it is not an easy task because the modern world says that you are valuable as much as you can produce. My research indicates that disabled individuals are unhappy with the time they spend with the highly educated individuals. They say we are happy with those who have not trained well because they don't touch upon our personality. But when we are with highly educated individuals, I have made a research in Turkish society. My research was arguing that the meaning of disability, the meanings assigned by society to disability, constitutes an identity which is not produced from the personality of disabled individuals. I have termed as imposed disability identity. And the participants say the highly educated individuals are checking if we know PowerPoint, if we know Excel, if we know computer, if we can draw a picture, we are valuable. If we cannot do that, we are not. But for those who are not highly educated, rely upon our value, and they say, you are created by Allah, meaning you have a value. This is one of the remarkable results I have found. So I suggest everybody to think about this question: why Allah has created blindness? What would be the benefit of blindness for humanity? I can talk about two benefits of blindness. You know, we use scanners in our offices to scan the documents or visual materials.
Yeah.
Scanner was invented by Kurzweil, Ray Kurzweil, an American scientist, in order to produce a reading machine for the blind. He has produced a machine called Scanner. I have seen such machines in the early versions. We were putting our books on the machine and we were scanning. So the machine was used widely in the industry. So, but the invention is rooted back to reading problem of blind people. When we talk about telephones, telephone was invented by Graham Bell. Graham Bell's father was working in a deaf school, and his father asked him to produce a machine for helping him to teach deaf people to hear. Because at that time, sign language was prohibited. They wanted them to be a normal person, in quotes. Normal person, in quotes. It's not my labeling. They said, we want to make them to be normal. We need to make them to be normal. So we should teach them how to hear. So while he was working to produce such a machine, he has found that he can transmit voice. Then telephone was invented. So we need to search for hikmah. Hikmah is an Arabic word, and I think we can translate into English as knowledge. We need to find out hikmah of blindness. We need to try to find out the hikmah of deafness, for example, instead of labeling individuals, because we believe in Allah, and Allah does not do any useless thing. If we consider Allah can do some useless thing, this assumption takes us out of Islam. So we need to understand why Allah has created such individuals and what would be their contribution to the society. And if we can go into this manner, I am pretty sure we will stop fighting with each other because of our bodies.
Beautiful, beautiful, deep reflection, Professor. I'm grateful. I'm actually grateful that I asked the question, because it is a difficult question, but mashallah, tabarakallah, your reflection is so deep, and we invite all our listeners to reflect on it. And it needs another episode on its own, to be honest. Mashallah, tabarakallah. We're very grateful to have you for this very relevant discussion. Jazakallah khair. Allah, we're going to end here. And we appreciate every moment with you, Professor. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك يا الله ونتوب إليك.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of living, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come yet again. Come. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi.